If you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Susan. And in today's video, we're going to be making pumpkins. And we're just going to pretend that it's not 1,000,000 degrees outside. So let's get started. Great way to change up your pumpkin is to use yarn. For this one, I'm going to be using this white foam pumpkin, and I needed a green pumpkin to go with a project that I made for my entryway. So first we're gonna remove the stem, and this one was in there like really good. I had to do some serious tugging and then it finally popped out, and I'm gonna be using this chenille yarn in this really pretty dark green color. And I just measured from the top of the pumpkin to the bottom and cut strips. Using my glue gun, I attached the strips all the way around the top, and it did take a lot of strips. I really thought this was going to be an easy project and go really fast because this yarn is a thicker yarn. It did not go fast at all. I felt like I was never going to get this thing covered. So I was a little worried that the white would show through, so I decided to paint it, which should have been done first, but I went ahead and painted it. Painted it this brown color, and it kind of looked like wood, which is kind of cool. So anyway, the yarn ended up covering the whole pumpkin, so it was actually not necessary. Then I added a little bit of glue at the top so that when I turned it over to glue them to the bottom, it just made it a little bit easier to keep them in place. So this is like really easy. It's just time consuming. Like I said, I felt like I was never going to get this pumpkin covered. And this yarn is extremely messy when it's cut. So not only was I covered in hot glue strings, I was also covered in green yarn. But I do love how it turned out in the end. Then fill in all the spaces to cover the pumpkin completely. And then here I'm just gluing on 3 at a time to make it go just a little bit faster. Okay, so after filling in all of the spaces, I hot glued a stick to the top, and it's just a stick that I cut from our yard. And I don't have this part recorded. I did add a piece of yarn across the top down to the bottom and then twisted it and came back up to the top and tied it. So it looked like it needed something extra, so I did this so that I could hot glue them down the side to make it look like the vine. And so I just hot glued them in different spots just to hold them in place. And here's how it turned out. Okay, so for these pumpkins, I'm using a leftover pool noodle that I had from another project. And just using my scissors, I just cut off a piece. And it's about 2 inches. And just using your scissors, go around the top and taper it however much you want, just to give it a more pumpkin shape. So then you're going to end up with a piece that looks like this. Next, I added paint so that the purple wouldn't show through. And this actually didn't work on this pumpkin, and you will see that in just a minute. So this actually works perfect because it already has the hole for your yarn to wrap through, because I know I've seen some people use the foam pumpkins and have to hollow out the middle. So this is already there for you, so that's perfect. And I'm using this large needle and feeding it through the hole, and then tying it onto the bottom. But instead of having to pull an extremely long piece of yarn through the hole each time, because that would take forever, I decided to cut sections, like really long sections of the yarn, and then tied each one to the pool noodle. And so here's where the paint didn't work. It started flaking off. And I did make another pumpkin like this, and it did work on my previous one. But for some reason, it just kept flaking off of this one, so I just went ahead and scratched it off. So we're just going to be sure to cover it completely. I fed them all through my needle, and then pushed it down into the center of the hole and pulled it through. And then I had to do a little fidgeting because I didn't like how that looked. So I just straightened them up and then just kept wrapping it around the pool noodle. But then I got the hang of it. So it started going really fast. I didn't quite make it around to the very end. I actually ran out of yarn. I didn't make my strips long enough. So I did have to tie them off and then tie an extra piece on and then continue to the end. And for the stem, I'm going to be using this leftover piece of rope. And this is what I used on my side tables that I did for my patio. It was just a leftover piece, and I thought it would be really cute as the stem. So I just cut a small piece off and stuck it down into the center. And to finish it off, I added a little bit of moss to the top of it. And look how cute. Oh my goodness, they are the cutest little pumpkins. And I made another one. And for this one, I did a chain stitch, which is super easy. And if you know how to crochet, of course, you know the chain stitch. And even if you don't know how to crochet, it is super easy to do. And I just love how it looks. These would be so fun to do with kids because they're very easy to make. And they're so cute to make for a tiered tray because they're just the perfect size. I think they're adorable. I'll show you really quickly how to do this one. First, we're just going to make a slip knot. And you just have to wrap it around your fingers and pull it through. And then pull up on it. And then you're going to take your crochet hook, stick it through your slip knot, and then go under your yarn and pull through, and that's it. So under your yarn, pull through, under your yarn, pull through, and just continue to go all the way down your yarn and just make a really, really long chain. And you will end up with something that looks like this. And then at the end, you will just cut it and pull it through, and that just ties it off so it doesn't unravel. And then I just took that and wrapped it around the pool noodle. And these were a lot of fun to make. Moving on to our next pumpkin. So for this one, we're going to be using pipe cleaners, wooden beads, and twine. So to start, we need 4 pipe cleaners. And then we're just going to bend them in half just to find the center. Okay, so now we're just going to take 2 of the pipe cleaners and twist them together. And then we're just going to continue twisting the rest of the pipe cleaners onto our X. And then it ends up looking something like this. So just make sure that they're all pulled really tightly and they're on there really secure. And then we're just going to add our beads. So I added 5 beads to each pipe cleaner. And then just try to space them evenly all the way around. Okay, so next we're just going to pull all of them up to the top. And I realized that my pipe cleaners weren't long enough and it was kind of difficult for me to twist them all together. So I decided to twist 2 of them together all the way around. And then it looked something like this. And then I brought them to the top. And this made it easier to hold all of them together and then give it a good twist. Still a little bit difficult, but I ended up getting it. So just twisting them. And then next you're just going to shape your pumpkin. And for the stem, I added hot glue and then just wrapped some twine all the way around the top. So after making that one, I decided to try to make a bigger one. So I took 2 pipe cleaners, twisted them together to give it a little more strength because it was going to be a bigger pumpkin. And you can use wired twine, which would work perfectly, but I didn't have that. So I already had the pipe cleaners on hand. And so that's what I used. Okay, so after twisting them together, you're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. Okay, so next we're going to take 2 of our twisted pipe cleaners. We're going to twist them in the middle, about 3 inches, and make 1 long piece. And then we're going to repeat that same process with all of our leftover pipe cleaners. So then you end up with 4 really long pieces. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing where we twist 2 together. And this time I twisted 2 together, twisted the next 2 pieces together, and then placed it on top of the first 2 and twisted them all together. And then I tried to straighten my pipe cleaners a little bit, just give them a little tug. And then for this one, I decided to paint my beads. And so the easiest way to get all of these beads painted really quickly is just add your paint to a container, add a little bit of water, mix that up really well, and then drop in all of your beads. And then just give them a good shake. Swirl them all around until they're fully covered. And then I just dumped them out on a plate and used the extra paint that was still left in the container and just poured it over the top of them. Okay, so now all of our beads are painted and dried. We're just going to do the same technique and add all of our beads onto our pipe cleaners. And as you can see, they're not fully dried. And so for this pumpkin, I did incorporate smaller beads with the larger beads and just created a pattern and then just did that same pattern on all of my pipe cleaners. And so here I was just trying to see how big it would be and realized I needed to add more beads to it. And then once again, pull all of your pipe cleaners to the top. And this one was a lot easier because I have a lot of pipe cleaner left over at the top, and then just give it a twist. And then the leftover is what is going to form your stem. Then just shape your pumpkin. And I also added twine to this one as well. And this is a very simple project, so if you have young kids, I think this would be fun to do with them. And here's how they turned out. So another idea for pumpkins is to just paint them. So up next are these little white pumpkins that I found on clearance at Walmart. And I love that they already have all of this texture on them, so I decided to just paint them. And so for the first one, I'm going to be using this Waverly chalk paint in the color Moss. And it's such a pretty green color. And it dries darker, so it turns out really pretty. And for the second one, I'm using the color Celery. I painted the stems with this really pretty gold. And I did that for both of the pumpkins. And then decided to add some gold to all of these little cutouts in this pumpkin to give it a little more detail. And I played around with this pumpkin and added some paint techniques and then didn't love it. So that's the great thing about paint, is you can just repaint it. So I decided to paint the pumpkin white with black stripes, and then I cut strips out of this orange ribbon and attached them using a little bit of hot glue. Then I took this mesh bag that some pumpkins came in and tied a bow. I hot glued one to the front and one to the back, and this is how it turned out. Another way to dress up your pumpkins is to just add glitter glue. It looks like this with just one coat, so I did add multiple coats to it. And here's what it looks like when it dried. And then I did one with black glitter. And for this one, I just used yarn and just went around the pumpkin. I removed the stem and it just pops right out, and I wrapped my yarn around it and then stuck the stem back in, and this holds the yarn in place. Another easy idea is to just add moss to the top of your pumpkins. For this one, I wrapped it in a mesh bag, and it's the bag that these pumpkins actually came in. Once again, I just popped off the stem, wrapped it with the bag, pushed the stem back in, holds everything in place. So for this pumpkin, I originally made this pumpkin years ago, but I didn't like how I made the stem. So I thought I would redo it and just add it to this video and show you how I made it. So I'm using a pair of pants that were my son's when he was really little. And all you have to do is cut the leg part of the pants. This piece is about 10.5 inches. And now just turn it inside out. Bunch up the end of the pants and tie it off. And you can use a rubber band for this. I'm just using a piece of yarn. So once you have that tied off, you're going to turn it right side out. And so now your tied end is on the inside of your pumpkin. Next, add your stuffing. Then take the top, which is the raw edge, and just push it down into the inside of your pumpkin. And then take a piece of yarn and tie it around your pumpkin really tight, and that's going to make the crease lines in your pumpkin. And then to finish it off, I'm using a stem that came out of one of my fake pumpkins. And I just stuck it right down in the top. And I did end up adding a little bit of moss. And here's how it looks.